Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. We're so glad that you have listened to these programs and you're with us today. And this is Mark with Word of Faith Fellowship, and we're sharing with you the good news about Jesus Christ. All the wonderful things that Jesus has done in our lives at the Word of Faith Fellowship. We've been coming on this program now for going on 2 years, and we have had many people from our church sharing their testimonies. I think we're now over 200 people from our church sharing how God has brought them through so many things, and He's brought them through, and they're here testifying of the power of God that changed their lives. And today I have two more people. We just keep coming, and so many people want to share with you the wonderful things about Jesus. So I have Alice Sabatino with me, and she is actually the bookkeeper at my law firm. That's Farmer and Morris Law. She's been there with us for many years. She does a fantastic job keeping all of our books straight, which I'm sure is a big job, but she is a wonderful person to have with us. We love having her, and she's such a blessing. And also her daughter is here, Mary, and she is actually a dental hygienist. Both of them came here from New York originally, and then by way of Leland, Wilmington area. Leland's near Wilmington on the coast there. So they're going to share with you some very important things about God's journey that God brought them through in their lives. And it's a wonderful testimony. So let's listen. So, Alice, you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jim, for having us. Good morning to our listeners. Ever since we have been doing the radio programs, I've carried to come and share, and God has done many, many things for me over the years, miracle after miracle. But there was one area that I really felt like I was supposed to share. The delivering power of God in my life from something quite debilitating that I suffered for many years. So I'll go back just a little bit to my childhood. My mother would tell this story about me when I probably was just a toddler because I was in a stroller. She said that there were some like leaves scuttling next to the stroller, and it frightened me, and I would start to cry. And that story was told to me several times, and it was always in the context of that I was a fearful child. Okay, that I don't remember that,
Right.
it just kind of stuck with me. I had fear, and so I moved on from there. Don't remember too much about any of that, and I think I was under 10 years old. I was young when the horror movies came out in the 1950s. I really don't even want to say their names. They're just horror monster movies, and my parents didn't know, to guard us about what we were doing or where we were going, and the movie theater was only a couple of blocks from where we lived, so we were just allowed to go, and it was at night, and I must say that these movies affected me for a number of years. As a child, I was very frightened by what I saw, and I had my own bedroom back then. I had two younger brothers, so they had their own bedroom, and I slept alone. And the torment that would come after me at night after seeing these movies, it went on for several years. So then from there, I went to high school, and I started having thoughts of that I just wasn't good enough. Just these thoughts were coming to me. I just wasn't good enough. And I was always a good student. I always applied myself. I always had good grades. And it was by the time I was a junior and a senior, there was a competition going on with us, just me and several other girls, who could get the top grade in every single class and every single test. So I strived and strived and strived to make the best mark. Because after all, what would people think of me if I didn't do my best, if I wasn't the best? So there was always that feeling like I just wasn't good enough, and this was my way of saying, well, at least I can do this, So by the time I graduated from high school, I remember the day of graduation. I was like physically and mentally exhausted from that push of trying to do my best. And I graduated top in my class of 100 girls. So, but there was a price to pay for what I did. So then from there, the beginning of really the torment that I really went through with fear, I was about 19 years old, and I remember I was sitting in a place, and all of a sudden this feeling came over me. I didn't know what it was. It was it's hard to explain. It was kind of like an unreality feeling. I was like looking around, and like everything just seemed strange at that moment. It wasn't exactly a lightheaded feeling. I that's all I can think of is I just started looking around, and just things just didn't look weird to me. And so I thought, what is that? What is that all about? And I know the Bible says that you should take every thought captive and find out if that thought is from God or where is that thought coming from. And I didn't know that at the time. And I know our Pastor Jane, she teaches all it takes is one thought for you to go down into a path of destruction. And that's what happened to me that day. So from there, I don't know exactly the time frame, but the torment from that, I started having more fearful thoughts, and more symptoms were happening to me. It happened probably over several years. I was dizzy. I had a rapid heartbeat. My vision became very sharpened. Like it was just the weirdest sensations that I was having, and then I had more of these unreality type feelings, and it was very tormenting to me because I did not understand what was happening. I couldn't understand it. I just wanted to know what was wrong with me. So from there, what I know now, what people call are panic attacks, I did not know that then. I had no idea what they were. I just knew that these things were happening to me. So if I went into the grocery store and I had one of these, I didn't want to go back to that grocery store because I was afraid it was going to happen again. Or if I went to the post office, or if I was sitting in church, or if I was at work, if this happened to me, I had like major fear that it was going to happen to me again, because I didn't understand, Mark. I just didn't understand what was going on. So after a number of years of this, they would wax and wane, let's put it that way. Sometimes they would be worse. I would have worse episodes, and sometimes it was okay. I could function, so to speak. And but after all of so many years of that, I began to think, especially in the worst episodes, that I kept hearing, "You're going insane. You're losing your mind. You're going insane. What are people going to think of you? How are you going to explain this?" And at that point, I had my I was married. I had my children. My children were small, and it terrorized me. That thought terrorized me, that I was losing my mind, that I was going insane, and I didn't, because all of my physical symptoms lined up with it. The dizziness, the rapid heartbeat, this sharpened vision, this total feeling of unreality that I was going through when this was happening to me. It was like proof that, yes, I was going insane. I was losing my mind. So I just wanted to know what was wrong with me, Mark. I had no answers, none, no answers.
Was there anything that would trigger this in you, or would it just come randomly?
It just would.
Wherever you were, sometimes you didn't know it was coming,
right.
But all of a sudden they would come on you.
Well, at that point, the fear was so intense that if I would go into a place, I would think, well, this is going to happen to me. It's probably going to happen to me. And sure enough, of course it would. Right. So, but anyway, I had... all those years, I just wanted to know what was wrong with me. I went to, at one point, I went and I saw a medical doctor, and, he just kind of looked at me. I told him what was wrong, and he just looked at me, and he prescribed me some Valium. So I took that for a little while. It like put a Band-Aid on the problem. And the one pill might have lasted 4 hours, just like when you take an aspirin. At the end of the 4 hours, all that was back at me.
Yeah.
So there was really no cure, with the Valium. And so that wasn't my answer. I knew it wasn't my answer. And then at another heightened period, I went and saw a counselor. I'm not sure what his credentials were, Mark. I really don't know if he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, whatever. And I only went to him a couple of times, and he was trying to lead me down this path that I had all this anger in me, and I had to acknowledge all this anger, And I would leave there, and I would think, what does anger have to do with all this fear that's coming after me? I just thought that was not my answer. Okay, so one day, Phil, my husband, he was at work. My children at this point were both in school. And it was an afternoon that it was very, very intense. All I can say was the thoughts and the unreality and the rapid heartbeat and all of that. It was extremely intense. And you've heard of excruciating pain. Mm-hmm. Well, these thoughts were excruciating. The torment, that's all I can think of. It was more than torment. It was excruciating thoughts. And I started to hear, why don't you just end it all? Why don't you just end it all? And the torment was so bad that that's all I wanted, was the torment to end. I just wanted it to end. I just wanted it to end. I didn't think about my children. I love my children. They were my life, my husband, my life, my family. I loved my family. But it had nothing to do with them at that moment. The torment was so extreme that all I wanted to do was just stop this, stop, And that's when I started to hear, why don't you just end it all? But I was too afraid. I was too afraid to even take my own life, at that point. So, when I hear that someone has committed suicide, right away, it just is like, it hits me like, it didn't have to be that way. That's right. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, you didn't have to do that. God could have helped you. You didn't have to do that. And then I think about the families and what they might feel. I could have done more. What could I have done to stop this? Or maybe an anger at the person, their loved one that took their life. An anger like, why did you do that to me? And then I think back what happened to me. I couldn't even think about my family. I couldn't think about my children and my husband that I love dearly. All I could think about was what was going on in my head, the torment that was so excruciating. So we'll move on from there. And
were you going to church anywhere at this time? Well,
we were in church on and off at this time. I was raised a Catholic. When I met my husband, we started going to the Methodist church. I left the Catholic church when I was 18 for reasons that would be too much to go into for this time span. And I started going to church with him. And I was starting to learn about God and the Bible, which I knew nothing about. And it was like bringing hope to me at that time. But then we left that church and we moved. We moved about an hour away and had started attending another church. So we were in church on and off at that time. But I didn't know God, Mark. I didn't know that there was a God that could help me. There was no, and I still had, what's wrong with me? Right. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? So I just want to say that in Psalm 102, God says that I regard the plea of the destitute. I will not despise their prayer. I was destitute. Yeah. I was destitute. I was hopeless. I was helpless. There was nothing that I could do. Just the torment was excruciating. So at that time, my daughter became involved with friends down in a church in Leland, North Carolina, and that church was affiliated with Word of Faith up here, you know. So I started receiving their teaching tapes. And the pastor in that church in Leland was teaching exactly what our pastor Jane up here was teaching about crying out to God for help, you know, out of a place of desperation in your heart. You know, I just started learning that God could help me, Mark. You know, he could help me. So all I could do on some of those days of torment was I just cried out to God. I said, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. And really, I did not know that as I was crying out to him, that he was working in my circumstances. He was changing our circumstances. He was making a way for me to come to North Carolina and be set free. That was the ultimate plan of his. And all I did was ask him to help me. That's all I did was cry out to God. Sometimes it felt like 500 times a day. That's all I could do. I couldn't think straight. The torment was so bad. So we, you know, too much to go into. God helped us move to North Carolina from New York. We left everything. My husband and I, we left our jobs. We left our home of 20 years. We left our family. And at this point, Mary was already here in North Carolina. And so we moved, and that was in April. And in September, there was a Bible school starting in that church in Leland. And I knew that I hadn't worked. You know, I had quit my job. I hadn't worked those number of months. So the panic kind of eased off a little bit. There was really no stress on me at that time. But I knew when I started Bible school that I was going to have to get a job. We needed to work. You know, my husband and I, we needed jobs. You know, to pay our bills. You know, so I could feel the stress coming back after me. Like, how am I going to work? How am I going to work if I have these attacks coming at me? How am I going to find a job someplace? So, help me, Jesus.
So you were at the Bible school. You're having these thoughts.
Yes. So we started Bible school in September. And it was only the first few weeks that we were in Bible school. I remember standing in the foyer. We were on a break. It was, you know, we just had a little break in between the classes. It was a morning Bible school, 9 to 12, and we were on a little break. And I remember being out in the foyer, and I was looking out the window, and I knew my time was coming, that I would have to find a job, and I could feel that stress coming back on me about that. And I remember standing and looking out the window, not really thinking about anything, really. And all of a sudden, the Spirit of God starts speaking to me. And he starts explaining to me and giving me the answers to the questions that I had, what was wrong with me for the last 25 years. He started saying to me, he said, first thing he said to me, he said, "You are not going insane. It has been your enemy, the devil, coming after you, lying to you. You're not going insane." And then he explained to me how the thoughts of my mind affected my body, my physical body. So it started here with all these fearful thoughts, and then my body lined up with the thoughts. I started having the rapid heartbeat. I assumed the adrenaline was just pumping. I felt dizzy. The sharpened vision, you know, which I later learned is that fight or flight response.
Right.
You know, you're ready to respond to whatever the fear is, but the fear was irrational. I had nothing to fight against. So he explained to me that my physical symptoms were a normal response to the fearful thoughts that I was giving to. So it was like, oh, my questions were answered, Mark.
Yeah.
In just those few minutes. The questions that I had for 25 years. What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? You're going insane. You're losing your mind. The Spirit of God, in that short period of time, explained it to me. And Mark, that was it. That was my deliverance. That's all I wanted to know. The truth of God came to me. The voice of God came to me. He told me what it was, and that's all I needed to know. And for the last 25 years, I sit here in my right mind. Sometimes I feel like the demoniac that Jesus delivered of the Legion of Demons, the Legion of Demons, and I sit here in my right mind today. And I am so grateful to God for what he did for me. He'll do it for you. He's no respecter of persons. There's any kind of bondage that you might be in today or someone that you know, tell them Jesus is the answer. He was my answer. He came to me, he helped me, he delivered me, and he can do it for you. And I want to thank my pastor Jane, whom I love dearly. She's my dear friend. And if it wasn't for her and her teachings and what God showed her on how to help us, I would not be here today. I don't know what would have happened to me.
That's such a powerful testimony, Allison. You know, there's people out there listening that have exactly what you have. They have panic attacks,
Yes.
or they may have anxiety. They may have
Yes.
depression. Some of them may have the suicidal thoughts like
Yes.
you had. You know, everybody has the anxiety. Everybody can relate to that. You get in situations and that fear and that anxiety is there. And what you've said is such a key. When God spoke to you and there was a word of God that came to
Yes.
your heart,
It was
and it
the
was
voice
that,
of God.
that this is from the devil, and God explained to you that how this was affecting your body was you were having a thought. The
Yes.
devil is coming with this thought,
Right.
and you were really agreeing with the thought,
Yes.
and then you would panic.
Yes.
And how God was showing you, you know, you started with the verse that says that we should take every thought captive and lead it to Jesus.
Yes.
I love that verse because our thoughts are so important.
Yes, they are.
And we have to discern, is this thought from God or is this thought from the devil? Where did this thought come
Right.
from?
Yes.
Because God wants us to have his thoughts. And you were obviously listening to the devil's thoughts. And
Yes.
what key that was God spoke to you. This was from the devil.
Yes.
And it was a thought you were taking and you were receiving, and it was affecting your body.
Yes.
And God showed you, don't listen to those thoughts.
Right, don't listen.
Take it captive and
That's
listen to
right.
what God is telling you to do. You don't have to panic. God's going to take care of you. He's going to trust you. So, powerful testimony. I'm sure it's helping everybody because we can all see in our lives, maybe in the past or maybe in the present, all of that fear and anxiety. We don't have to have it.
No.
We can totally trust God.
Right.
So, well, Mary, we have a little bit of time left, so jump right in and tell us what God's done in your life.
Sure. Like Mark said, I grew up in Western New York, and I remember having just a really happy childhood. I was born and raised in a loving home. I have the best parents in the whole world. I remember just being a happy child, and we attended, like Mom said, we had attended several different churches. And I remember knowing that there was a God, but I didn't really know that Jesus could live inside of me, and that he could, that I could have a relationship with Jesus. And I grew up going to a public school, and I must be honest, public school just about ruined me. It was very difficult. I grew up in the 80s, and in the 80s you said you were picked on. Now they call it bullying. And so I guess I should say I was bullied. And because of that, I had a lot of hurt and rejection. I was always trying to be somebody really like Mom was. I was always trying to fit in, but it was like the thoughts of my mind where I'm not good enough, I'm never going to measure up. And so I always tried to be somebody. And one of the things that I did was I started listening to music, and music became my idol. And I like to say that, you know, I went to bed with it, I woke up with it, I had it in my ears all day long, and it really produced a lot of torment in my life. And my mom had started going to a non-denominational church, and my best friend and her family went there. And I remember liking going to that church, but I also remember that I wasn't quite ready for God. It was like God was starting to draw me, but I wasn't quite ready. And so I spent my teen years in high school always striving, trying to be somebody, trying to fit in. And I had, actually my senior year, I was dating a man who I thought I was going to marry. And he came home over Christmas break, and, you know, all the emotions that can come with Christmas. He broke up with me, and I was devastated. And I just went like just on this downward spiral of depression, and I turned to my music to feel better, but it didn't work. And by the time I was 17, I was a very, very tormented young lady. And spring break of my senior year, my best friend Allison and her family, they invited me to go on a trip to Florida. We were going to go to the beach. And I was very excited about that. I really wanted to go to the beach. Never been to a Florida beach. But on the way, we were going to stop in North Carolina and visit her uncle, who was a youth pastor at a church there, a small church there. And so I said, well, that's fine. We can stop there. That's fine with me. And my friend's father looked me square in the eyes and he said, if you go with us on this trip, your life will never be the same. You are going to change. And I remember in all of my hopelessness and all of my torment in my mind, that went in my heart. Those words, and they were from God, those words went into my heart that maybe there was hope for me. Maybe there was light at the end of my very, very dark tunnel. And so we went on the trip and we stopped in North Carolina at this little church. And I remember walking through the doors and they were praying. And I loved it. Now, I need to say that this church was affiliated with Word of Faith. And I loved it. I loved the people. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was there was a lot of young people there that wanted to serve God. I had never seen that before. And being 17 years old, watching other young people that wanted to serve God, and they sang with their whole heart and they preached and they prayed for people. It was amazing to me. And so we only were there for a few days, and then we traveled down to Florida to go to the beach. And I didn't want to be at the beach. It was really strange. My friend and I, we begged her father, please take us back to this church in North Carolina. Please, we want to go back and see everybody. Please, we want to go back to church. And I think he was pretty perplexed. I mean, two 17-year-old girls saying they wanted to leave the beach and go back to church. But he cut our Florida trip short and he took us back to that church. And when we got back to the church, we were invited to a youth seminar here in Spindale. It was July of 1991. And of course we wanted to come. And so that was my first time coming to Word of Faith. And same thing with that little small church in Leland. I walked through these doors of Word of Faith and I loved it. I met Pastor Sam and Jane. I met their daughter Robin. I met Mark's wife Holly. And I loved it. God, the presence of God was there. And I'd never felt the presence of God like that before. And of course, it was a youth seminar. So there were a lot of young people preaching, teaching, sharing, singing. It was wonderful. And it was then that I just prayed. I started to pray to God. And I said, God, what is your will for my life? I didn't know what it was, but I said, what is your will for my life? I just want to do the will of God. And this was such a miracle for me because I was so worldly. I was so into my music. I was, I had dated on and off. Relationships were important to me, but it was like all of a sudden, all the things that were so important to me did not matter anymore. I just wanted to do the will of God. So in August of 91, my friend Allison and I, we both moved to Leland and we joined the church there. And we lived there for 16 years. I was there for 16 years. And in 2002, I got married. And in 2006, my husband and I heard from God to move here. And I've got to say, that was the best thing that has ever happened to me because we were in the will of God and we prayed and we cried out to God. And all the while, all through these years, God's delivering power was there for me. All I had to do was trust Jesus. I mean, even in the depths of despair, even in all my hopelessness that I thought I was never going to come out of, Jesus was there for me. And so we moved here in 2007, and the presence of God is here. And my life has changed. I am so happy. I'm not tormented anymore. I don't have to live in torment. I'm so grateful for that. And God gave me a job. I have the best job. I have the best family. I have a son. It's a miracle. And I'm so grateful. I mean, I've got a deep relationship with some of these people in the church, Robin and Holly. I'm very close to some of these people, and my life has changed. And I just praise Jesus. It is a total miracle for a young girl to want to serve God. And I just want to say that if young or old, I mean, if you're tormented, if there's things that are going on in your life, like even Mom said, the torment, the panic attacks, if there are things that are at you, just cry out to Jesus. That's what we did. We cried out to Jesus, and he was there. He is real. He can come and live on the inside of you. You do not have to be worldly. You do not have to follow the world and be tormented. You can serve God. And I am so grateful to be part of the Word of Faith Fellowship. And I just love everybody there.
And such a powerful testimony, Mary, and what a great word from both of you, and that is that we're going to cry out to Jesus, and
Yes.
he hears
That's
our
right.
cry. I love
Hears
that,
our cry.
and both of your
That's right.
testimonies say that today. Whatever is going on in your lives today, everyone that's listening, if you will cry out to Jesus, just like Alice shared and just like Mary shared, if you will cry out to Jesus, he will come and hear
Yes.
your cry. I love the verse
will.
that Alice shared. He regards the plea of the destitute,
That's
it says
right.
in
Yes.
Psalms. He will regard your plea
Yes.
today
That's
if you'll
right.
cry out to him. So thank you again for listening. This is Mark sharing with Word of Faith Fellowship. We're on this program Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9. Go to our website. We have all of these programs videoed and recorded. Website is wordoffaithfellowship.org. Thank you and have a great day.